Hello and welcome to Book Bites, a book club podcast for developers. This week we're talking about Life in Code, a personal history of technology by Ellen Ullman. I'm Adam Garrett Harris.
I'm Jason
Megan
Staten. I'm Jason Staten.
And I'm Megan Duclos.
All right, so Megan, you picked out this book, and I was super excited about it because I've heard that one of the books by Ellen Ullman, I don't remember which one, is one of the best books of all time that you must read before you die.
Oh, I
And
didn't know that.
yeah, I think it was actually Close to the Machine.
Okay.
Because on the cover of this one, it says author of Close to the Machine.
Okay, cool.
Which is a novel. And then this one, I just want to go ahead and read this one. It's her newest one, and it's more of a memoir about her life in technology. And she's been in technology for a really long time, so I thought that'd be really cool. And she's a woman in technology, and I want to see her perspective, especially from that long of a time ago.
Yeah, I did too. I think you were the one who told me about this book and about Ellen, and then I was like, yeah, we have to read it, obviously.
Yeah.
But those are exactly the same reasons why it was really interesting to me, and why I wanted to read it is just to hear her story of being a woman in this industry, especially in the 70s when it was in its infancy, and just like how it's evolved, how she's seen the whole industry evolve over time.
Yeah.
I did not know quite what to expect getting into it, other than it was a title of a book that was brought up by the two of you, and I am very glad that I had read this. I think Ellen's experience throughout her life is like it's a pretty awesome timeline to be along. Like awesome, not necessarily in terms of all good, but just like the number of things that she was near or lived through are one of those things that like I feel like we look back on and reflect on. I mean, it's still going on today, but like the number of historical like event things that she was there around, and like it it's just it was really a great read. I loved it.
Yeah, and she's a excellent author. It's very well written, and it just kind of sucks you in.
Yeah, I agree. I really loved it. It's more like a collection of essays than it is a memoir. It kind of serves both purposes there.
Yeah.
I think there were a couple of her essays that kind of lost my interest a little bit, but like most of them were amazing, and I loved them all. I mean, I love them all. There were just some that I'm like, I could have done without this one, but I don't know. I still really love the book.
Right. Yeah, and so the collection of essays are written from 1994 through 2017. And a lot of them were published in different places like Wired magazine or different places like that in some form. Maybe it was edited down, I'm not sure. But I'd never come across any of these.
Yeah, me neither.
Yeah, they were all new to me, and I had to double check too on some of the or like the note about the dates. I wasn't
Yeah.
quite sure, like having listened to it, I was like, her writing then was very much writing I feel like is applicable now, or feels very modern now, like in the perspectives.
Yes.
Yeah.
I felt like it was very insightful for the time that it was written.
Yeah, I agree.
That like I mean, one thing in particular is like the Silicon Valley boys club type of perspective. I mean, that's something that we reflect back on now, but that's something that she lived through and had remarks to say as it was ongoing.
Yeah. Yeah, it said very early on she left full-time engineering for consulting because she felt out of place. Like engineering culture is very teenage boy puerile. And there's this story where she was back at a place where she used to work talking to a coworker, and he was very understanding about why she left. And then someone like yells across the room that he has to come quick because their like water gun battle is about to start.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it was it was in my first job probably 2 or 3 weeks in, I was working at my desk and recall getting hit in the back by one of the Nerf bazookas. You remember those with like the huge rocket?
Not
I,
particularly.
like I, I don't know. I just recall it as like a kid is something that like other kids had in the neighborhood or something. I was like, whoa, that's huge. And yeah, having somebody from the QA team like arc a shot over a wall and like hit me in the back with it when we were working a little bit later one night. And this like that's kind of the embodiment of it. Like you said, kind of like teenager like type humor and approach to things that doesn't necessarily match the culture or people or like expectation that everybody has in the workplace.
Yeah, and there's this quote that said, "Software engineering is a meritocracy. Anyone with talents and abilities can join the club. However, if rollerblading, frisbee playing, and water balloon wars are not your idea of fun, you're not likely to stay long."
Yeah. Do we want to go into some more specific things? Like, kind of, maybe we just go through the parts, and we can kind of talk about what we liked from each of those, or do we each want to just bring something up that stuck out to us?
Yeah, I think just talking about some of our favorite parts, because there are 5 parts to this book, but they're just kind of loosely,
Yeah.
like they're all kind of loosely related, kind of not related.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, it's it's hard to know what to bring up first because I have so many thoughts about this book.
Go for it.
Um, oh, okay. I'm trying to think of what there's some I'm going to save for later, but like more in the beginning, when she's talking about just the programming life and what it was like, and when she first started, like I think it was like in the 70s. She talks about her job and what it was like, and especially as a woman working with a bunch of men, and just the blatant sexism, um, which I, of course, I knew existed at the time, but some of her stories were enraging. Um,
Oh my gosh.
and I think it really showed me like how far we've come as a society. And I know that like I personally have it really good where I'm working right now, where everyone's really just, I don't know the right words to use here. Everyone's really respectful, and they don't expect me to be bad at my job because I'm a woman. There's,
Mm,
you know what I mean? Like I'm
yeah.
having trouble with my words tonight, but I know that that's not true everywhere now. I hear stories all the time from women in our industry and outside of it of hearing almost exactly the same things that men said to her uh, at that
Mm.
time, and it's still alive and well.
Oh god.
In the workplace, unfortunately. But I just, comparing that to my own experience now, uh, showed me how far we've come. I mean, there's still a lot of work to be done because not every workplace is as good as mine. I feel like I'm bragging about where I work, but like not every workplace tolerates that behavior, but a lot do. And so like there's still work to be done, but we have come a long way as well.
Really terrible bosses. She mentions one that would he rubbed his clammy hands up and down my back while I worked. That was one of the quotes.
Yeah, that's
And
nauseating.
then
Yeah.
oof. And then she worked for a man who said at a meeting, "I hate to hire you girls, but you're all so smart."
Yep.
He would also interrupt me often to say, "Gee, you have pretty hair."
Yep. Yep.
That-
That was
It's just scummy, and she even talks. It's later on in the book or later one of the essays where she was talking about them having too big of storefronts on one of the streets, and that they needed to have smaller footprints so that way people could go and build kind of their mom and pop type shops.
Yeah.
And the people that she was talking to just kind of looked the other way as if like,
Mm.
little girl, you don't know what you're talking about, when in turn she actually um took on her dad's real estate company when she was pretty young. And so did know what she was talking about.
She ran a
Yeah.
building in New York City.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
that intimidates me.
Yeah. Well, yeah, just like putting all of these life experiences together and what the skills she had and what she taught herself and just all the nonsense she dealt with. It's just, I'm a big fan. I'm fangirling right now and I'm not ashamed. She's just great.
Yeah. So I really did. I loved her story of how she became a programmer, and it doesn't get into that until part 4.
Yeah.
In 1970, she was a student at Cornell University. She lived in a farmhouse and met these poor farmers nearby. And then she kind of moved away, lost connection. Then the Sony Portapack came out, which was this low cost, high quality video camera. And it cost $1,500, which is like, I think she said like $9,000 in today's money or something. So it's really expensive. They got a grant to get it, plus some other gear that they needed, started a club, and started making documentary videos. And they it was always like trying to promote social change. They would film an addict shooting up to dispel any glamour that drugs are glamorous. They did one about the Ona Onondaga Indians fighting to prevent the construction of a road through their land, and they taught classes on it. And then they made a video of these farmers. I thought this was really interesting. The farmers had milk cans that would get picked up by a co-op, and then all of a sudden the co-op said, "No, you need to buy this giant tank." And the tank was prohibitively expensive for them, so they couldn't afford the debt because it cost tens of thousands of dollars for the tank. And honestly, they would need twice as many cows to even fill it up to a decent level. So they made a documentary about this, tried to show that, it's more efficient, but it's going to drive out small dairies. And in the end, the Milk Collective still won. But then years later, she's just walking down the street and sees a TRS 80 in a window. And she's like, well, I don't know anything about computers, but it's technology, kind of like the Portapack. It's like personal technology. So it's for individuals. So she thought, I can fool around with it and see what happens. It promises adventures in electronics. And she was just kind of wondering, what could you do with it? Could you make art with it? And that's what led to her career as a programmer. Like a year later, she got her first job as a programmer
Yeah.
because there was such a lack of programmers, because computer science was just a sub department of engineering, and engineers don't want to go write code. So anyone who had written any code could get a job. So she turned down all sorts of job offers, worked temp jobs, taught herself, learned BASIC, and became an ordinary computer programmer, and then eventually became a software engineer. And I feel like now that distinction is kind of lost. We just call people software engineers right away.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're definitely quick to jump into it. I think also the accessibility of getting in now is definitely lower in some regards. Like having a TS80, like going out and making that purchase is um prohibitively expensive for many people. And so the fact that like she was able to do that, like
Yeah.
got her into that. And so in some ways we have certainly lowered barriers. But I mean, kind of continuing along that thought is like she had her flow, but like I loved that she also reflected at what we now have for kind of intro to programming.
Oh
And
yeah.
in the
Yeah.
review of like the, what is it, Udemy course, it
Yeah.
was, and just kind of her perspective on like what it takes to learn Python. Like if you go and Google learn Python, like you're probably going to wind up on this course. And so how you are kind of met with, she describes it as like four men standing in a semicircle in front of you.
For white
And
men.
yes, and trying to be humorous by having you do your first exercise being rock paper scissor lizard Spock, and making like immediately making some type of cultural reference that you may not be able to connect with.
Yeah.
And I mean, in some ways it's like it's giving you that intro of like, yeah, this is this is the type of stuff that you'll encounter. But at the same time, like, it could be a very fast turnoff for people to say, "Oh, this isn't the place for me,"
Yeah,
and
yeah.
like it
I
made me cringe.
I really loved that part too. I loved her description of the guys on the video and how she talked about how, like, I don't know if she used this word in the book. I can't remember, but she talked about how it was like kind of endearing and she kind of just loved them. Or was it someone else? I don't remember, but she was just like it's like these nerds with like their terrible dad jokes, and it
Yeah,
was so
yeah,
familiar to her, and it was kind of like you said, she said, like, you may realize that this is not the type of people you want to be working with, but it is kind of gonna be the type of people you'll be working with, so it was kind of accurate.
yeah,
Yeah, and then kind of the second side of it is where you have those forums of people who are actually like struggling through this and making their way along despite things that may sway them the wrong way. And I do feel like she does a pretty good job of not necessarily like calling them out as being malicious or being gatekeepers, but rather just like it is kind of the structural norms that exist and that are familiar with, and it's like biases that we're unaware of.
yeah. Yeah, there's a good quote in this section that says, "The crucial question, the answer to which determines how easily one crosses into the programming room, indeed into any room, is this: do you feel invited in?" And
Yes.
it's
Yeah.
so true. You walk into a room, whether you're walking into a church or you're walking into a gym or walking into a workplace or a school, is there anyone here who looks like me?
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah, and for some people that is dramatically easier than others.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, so she did that Python course, and then she did the design and analysis of algorithms course
Mhm.
taught by some university. I don't remember which one.
Was it
Uh,
MIT? Was it
Stanford,
Stanford.
maybe.
Yeah.
Stanford? It was some Ivy League something.
And right off the bat, here's the reasons to learn algorithms: impress a prospective employer, ace your technical interviews, become a card-carrying computer scientist, have the lingo to fit into the higher levels of the technical community, and you won't feel excluded at dinner parties where they joke about Dijkstra's algorithm.
Yeah.
Those are
And
really silly reasons to learn algorithms.
yeah, but honestly, the technical interviews is a big one.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very true. I had to think about that a little bit with Dijkstra's algorithm because we did that in the Imposters Handbook when
Right.
we went through that long ago. I mean, and I could still definitely not implement it off the cuff, but that is the reality of interviews, though, is you get that sort of stuff thrown at you where it's totally irrelevant to your day to day,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
other than like you can think through a problem, but I do not know the last time at work where I thought to myself, Eureka, like I no longer have to do this in n squared polynomial time, but rather like I can get it in big O of n now.
hmm But it talks about how, okay, this is a Stanford course, but you're not getting the Stanford experience
Mm,
because you're not in the room. You don't have access to the professor's office hours. I don't even think they had a forum. And then the grading was not accurate
Yeah.
because they they couldn't have a person grade your work. There were too many people in the course. So they had an automated system, and the automated system just wasn't very good. So you couldn't know for sure if you were actually learning it. And then at one point the professor like turns to the camera and he's like, "What do I expect of you? Nothing."
nothing.
Oh my
That's
God.
so disheartening to hear.
Yeah.
She said, just like, I could practically like see so many people just closing the window and not coming back because and who wants to hear that from an instructor of a class?
Yeah. And then, so later on, so she's feeling more and more excluded from that class and wondering, like, well, how do I even get to invited to a dinner party where they're joking about Dijkstra's algorithm? And what would that joke even be? And then the next course she went through is programming for everyone. And she was like, this is going to be it. This is going to be the course I'm looking for. It's for everyone.
It was so close to being it.
And then before she even started the course, she found the instructor interviewing another instructor. So he had a whole bunch of courses taught by different people. Programming is for everyone on different topics. And he turned out to be like a sexist mansplainer.
Yup.
I could not believe it. She put the exact transcript in the book.
Oh, she did?
Yeah, where she said something about the woman instructor said something about, oh yeah, I just learned about how the menu with 3 lines, that's called a hamburger menu.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And then he
And
just
then
like,
he was like, you just learned that? And then he starts like mansplaining to her about it.
and it was a live stream. Like it wasn't just
Oh
some
yeah.
pre-recorded video that he could have edited it out. It was a live stream. So he like completely goes from, yeah, this is what our course is, this is what we'll teach you about, to like publicly shaming her for not knowing a thing, which is just ridiculous.
Yeah. You can't know everything. And yeah.
I think there's a relevant Xkcd for that, where when you say something to somebody and you say, "What? You don't know about this?" as like a downward thing,
Yeah.
when in fact, like, nobody knows everything, like you said, and so be joyous that they're getting to experience that new thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, he also made a really dumb joke. He said, "Do you know what it's called when there's 3 little lines when there's a shape of a human cut out in the 3 little lines?" Which that question doesn't even make sense.
What do you say, man hamburger or something? What did
Yeah,
he say?
he said it's called a man burger. It doesn't even make sense.
It's just a bad joke.
Yeah. And he's like, you gotta know what the hamburger icon is, and you gotta know what the man burger icon is.
It's just not even funny.
No. But she had a good quote in here too. She said, "Here's your chance." I mean, she was just not interested in the course anymore. But she said, "Here's your chance to learn the difficult feat of looking at prejudice and refusing to be diminished."
Yeah,
So, like,
that was a good
just
line.
learn what you need to know from this man and move on with your life.
Yeah, yeah. Take what you need and leave the rest.
Yeah. And again, like just like the dad jokes and the sci-fi references and US television references, this is kind of what it's going to be like, unfortunately.
Which is disheartening given like her aspirations, that like programming really does need to be opened up to everybody, and not necessarily that everybody needs to be a programmer, but rather that it should be an accessible thing to everybody rather than a select few. Because like if you think, if you just have like this small niche of society that is making all of these grand decisions for everybody, like they can't be like culturally sensitive or aware of like everybody's life
Yeah.
situation. And so but yet that is what's built around them. I mean, in
Yeah.
reading the book technically wrong a while back, and like seeing things as simple as like a bathroom scale that says "good job" if you're losing weight, when in fact you may not be needing to lose weight.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
Could be going through chemotherapy.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um
Or like have an eating disorder and that's just reinforcing the eating disorder. Yeah. That's not good.
and she mentions as well, first off, we need to welcome diversity into the monoculture that exists within, and we need to challenge the biased data. So that goes back to technically wrong, or you look like a thing and I love you, where the machine learning algorithms are fed all this previous biased data. We need to challenge that.
Yeah, for sure. I really loved her sentiment on this subject. Just talking about not just for these reasons should people have kind of a basic understanding of programming and software engineering, but um, well, what was it? She's saying like the general public should know that humans are writing this code and what type of thought processes we go through while we're writing the code, how to kind of think like a computer, um,
Hmm.
because it can. I can't remember exactly what it was, and I might just be making this up, or maybe this was like a thought I had because of something that she said. But I think it informs other people how to do their jobs, how to kind of work around that, because technology isn't going away. It's only going to become a bigger part of our lives. And
Hmm.
just having the general public have even a basic understanding of how it works under the cover, one, helps you be more informed when it comes to things like privacy and security, but also it can kind of inform the way that you, I don't know, use it. I don't know what I'm trying to say
Yeah.
here.
Yeah, she did. She also mentioned that one third one third of humanity has access to the internet,
Mm,
and the other two thirds, even though they don't have access to the internet, are still subject to that code running on the internet
yes. Yeah.
Hmm.
because governments run off of it, and all sorts of things around them run off of it.
Yeah. I liked when she talked about like Google's I don't remember what it's called. Google did a thing trying to bring the internet to everyone.
Oh,
And
Project Loon.
Hmm.
is that what it is? Yeah. And they're trying to bring the internet to everyone, and she's like, "Well, in a third world country, if you get, if you're starving and there's no food available to you, the internet's not going to help you. If you
Yeah.
get if you get malaria, the internet's not going to treat you."
Yeah, there was a quote from Bill Gates on that topic
Oh, yeah.
because Bill Gates, I mean, he's a computer guy, but he's a philanthropist now. He's trying to cure the entire world of polio and
COVID.
yeah, and COVID now, and
Except
trying to
for the
get clean.
rumors that he started it. Never mind. I'm just the conspiracy theory that is just nonsense.
So many conspiracy theories,
Yeah.
and
Sorry.
trying to get clean
Sidetrack.
water to people. So he's trying to put his money where it has the biggest impact, and getting
Yeah.
internet getting internet to people is just ridiculous when they have malaria or just they have bigger concerns.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like the hierarchy of needs. They're
Yeah.
just going like straight to the top when there's like some really base level foundational things that these people need.
Yes. Well, I'm miserable, but at least I have the internet. This episode of Book Bites is sponsored by Pluralsight. Pluralsight is the technology skills platform. You can see where your skills stand, master the latest technologies, and show off your expertise. They're currently hiring in Salt Lake City and Boston. They work in small, cross functional, autonomous teams focused on creating products, all the way from talking to customers, coming up with a plan, and testing the solution. Each team is autonomous, so they own the discovery, design, development, delivery, and production support of their part of the overall system. They encourage test-driven development, pair programming, continuous delivery, as well as refactoring and clean code. I actually work there myself, and they're an online learning company and have a culture of continuous learning. And they have book clubs and discussion groups, which, if you're listening to this podcast, you would love. Pluralsight was named the number 9 best workplace and one of the best workplaces for women by Great Place to Work. If you want to work there, visit pluralsight.com/career/engineering to learn more. And for those of you who would be interested in checking it out yourself, you can DM at Pluralsight on Twitter, and they'll send you a free trial code so you can check it out for yourself. And thanks to Pluralsight for sponsoring the show.
Can we talk about the close to the mainframe essay? I feel
Yes,
like
Yes.
that was
please.
a big one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a question on that.
Oh, okay.
So, I mean, I really loved just from the start of it, where she says, "In 1981, I decided I could not be a real programmer until I had experience on a mainframe computer. This was a completely abstract idea. I had no idea how to program a mainframe computer." And I actually had a question for the both of you, and that was, have you ever held yourself, or do you hold yourself to a criteria that you need to do something in order to be a real programmer? Not necessarily for everyone, but for yourself.
Yeah, actually, I've thought about this with front end versus back end or front end versus full stack. Kind of don't I know front end developers are real developers and I love the front end, but I wanted to have that under my belt to feel like a real programmer.
I can see that.
Yeah. Yeah. I can see that too. Um, I I feel kind of similarly. But now that you bring up the question, I'm kind of challenging that thought of, I have to meet these requirements to be a real software engineer or a real programmer. Because when she got to that part and she was saying that, I was like, that's just silly, especially now. Like, you don't need to be close to the mainframe in order to really be a programmer, because it's evolved so much. There's so many other layers of abstraction between the mainframe and most everyday software engineers, that's just like, that's such a silly thing. And it probably wasn't silly to her, and especially at the time it wasn't. So I'm not trying to diminish that at all, but like, it just seemed outrageous. Like, oh, I can't hold myself to that kind of a standard. But like, it kind of put into perspective, especially you asking that question of like, I don't have any specifics, but I do kind of have that imposter syndrome sometimes, where like, I'll come across something that I know nothing about, and I'll just be like, well, I guess I'm not really that smart, or I guess I really am not a real programmer. But that perspective there, like seeing her say something like that about herself, and me thinking that that's a little extreme, can kind of help me challenge those imposter syndrome thoughts in myself.
Hmm. Yeah, there's actually some really good quotes later on uh, in a different chapter about imposter syndrome,
Yeah.
where she's moved on from job to job, but the quote says, that state of not knowing proved permanent as I moved from machine to machine, operating system to operating system, language to language, each move a re-encounter with bafflement, as was my introduction to the mainframe.
Yeah.
Failing was also a permanent state of affairs. Programs crash. The causes of bugs hide from discovery. Designs lead to dead ends. Goals are ill conceived. Deadlines are absurd. One must develop a high tolerance for failure, learn to move forward from discouragement, find a ferocious determination, a near passionate obsession to solve a problem, meanwhile summoning the pleasures of the hunt.
Yeah, I think that was really well said. And that it's really like just the nature of our line of work.
And she was
Like,
like really scared about this imposter syndrome. She was
yeah.
just very aware of being self taught. Just aware, she said, aware of all times, I had only islands of knowledge separated by chasms of not knowing, into one of which I was certain to fall. And then
I
eventually she talked to some postdoctoral student in Berkeley, and he said, oh, I feel that way all the time.
Yeah, I really identified with that line, especially because I mean, I'm still pretty new to this line of work, and I love it, but I also feel, yeah, I have like these little islands of knowledge with huge chasms of the unknown still. And I know I'll feel like that forever a little bit, but
Yeah.
it can be a lot sometimes.
I, I think she is a prime example of how to deal with that unknown, is
Yeah.
seeing something in particular and saying, okay, well, I don't know that thing. I'm going to go do that thing so I know it. Like that is very much what is required in the career in general, is
Yeah.
working in the unknowns.
So she decides to find a job working on a mainframe, and she kind of lucked out to get this job. Like, the guy kind of begrudgingly gave her the job so that she'd be someone else's problem. Like, like
Right.
her 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 direct report was going to be someone else, and it was someone he didn't like. So he told her after she started, like, I thought you were going to be this other guy's problem. And um that's just a really great thing to hear when you start a new job,
Yeah.
I'm sure. But yeah, she just dives in and she learns, and she meets friends, like work friends, and then there's this bug. Can we talk about the bug that she like
Mhm.
Yeah. Well,
that
she
inspired
found
her book, The Bug?
oh, she found a mentor, and the mentor kind of taught her some stuff, and then he said, "Go fix bugs."
Yeah. So
He
she gets
fixed like
this.
three right off the bat.
Yeah. Yeah, and then she fixes, like, they had this huge long list of bugs, and she fixes all but one. This one bug that just gave everyone trouble for years. And she shows her boss, and he's like pissed off about it.
Yeah.
What, right? Am I remembering that correctly? He was like mad that she did all of that because I don't remember why he was so mad. He just didn't want her to do well.
Yeah. And it took her, that one bug took her like 10 months.
Yeah.
But that
Yeah.
bug had been there since the very beginning.
Yeah.
Everyone knew about it. Someone would say, "Oh yeah, it's closed." It's not closed, and then it would get reopened again, and then it would get closed again. And
And then she
and then
found
one
it.
guy
Yeah.
said, "Oh yeah, it's not our problem. It's in our some vendor software." And
Which they didn't even use
Mhm.
third-party software.
yeah, she was like, "That's a lie."
Yeah.
How many times have you pointed at external code to be the
Yeah.
source of your problem? I find that pretty much every time I do that, it ultimately winds up being my own fault.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And another cool thing about the story, this was originally published. The title of this was Pencils when it was published in Wired in 2013. Because every day she would go into work, there was a legless man selling number two taekwondo. Anyway, selling number two pencils. She would buy one every day, and then she just had
Yeah.
a stack of them. And then she was like, when she decided to buckle down and try to figure out this code, she apparently you couldn't just print stuff yourself. She had to put in an order to have some stuff printed, and someone brought a stack of papers to her desk.
Of code.
Like it
Printed
was
code on paper.
yeah, and it was the code that was accordion style that you could rip
Mhm.
apart and had the
Dot
circles on the
matrix.
side
Yeah.
that you could
Yeah.
rip off. And she just leaned back in her chair, just it was so much nicer, especially considering the screen sizes they must have had on their desk to
Yeah.
have all of this paper and be able to see that much code at once and use her pencils and mark it up. And you can't just read it straight through because there's go-to statements. You got to look around to different places. And she just read it and read it and read it and read it and used those pencils that she was buying.
Yeah, I thought that was a really
And
cool
then
story.
when she actually found it, she showed the code. Someone had typoed a variable name and they put an underscore instead of a dash in the variable name. And so
Yeah.
they were printing out the wrong variable that got initialized to 0 up above.
Yep.
So that's why that column was just always 0. But before that, she actually fixed a bug that wasn't even documented that everyone knew was wrong, where a number couldn't be larger than it would just truncate it after
Oh,
the
yeah.
10,000s place.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Yep.
she was like, okay, what about this bug? And then someone was like, oh yeah, that report is crap anyway because of this other bug. Back when it was written, 10,000 was a lot of money.
Yeah, that was good.
I also really like the story about what we feared while we feared Y2K.
Yeah. That was
What we were afraid of as we feared Y2K. So I was talking to my wife about this too because she was under the impression that Y2K came and it went, and for the average person, nothing happened. And so she was under the impression that the media just hyped it up, and then turns out it wasn't a problem at all. But this tells the story of her going around and talking to different people as they were trying to get their code Y2K ready and going to conferences and trying to
Yep.
see what people are doing to fix it. And it was a real problem, but people worked really hard and got it fixed.
Yeah, I was under the same impression until recently. And then I realized, oh, yeah, it really was kind of an issue that they had to fix. But then reading this book, I learned just how big of a project that was, if you can
Yeah.
call it a project.
One interesting thing. Well, first off, she says it was called the Millennium Bug, but it wasn't really a bug because a bug is a piece of code that causes a problem to behave not as intended. But the decision to handle years as two-digit numbers was intentional, conscious, and utterly rational.
Yep.
And then,
Yeah.
secondly, she said it's not a Millennium Bug because she thinks Millennium starts on the year 2001, which I can see both
Yeah.
both
Yeah.
ways.
I thought some of the perspective was like people thinking this code isn't going to be running in 30 years.
Yeah. So they were like newer programmers and they had to bring in the older programmers to try to figure it out. And what was fascinating is that a lot of the code, they didn't have the source code. They just had the assembler. So they had to write translators to convert from the assembler to COBOL, make sure that that's actually the same program, and then fix the COBOL.
That just sounds brutal.
Yeah.
It really does.
I
Does
mean,
not sound like fun at all.
I wonder at what point they said, okay, let's actually finally prioritize this technical debt.
I don't know.
Like, was it the beginning of 1999? Okay, you have
Um,
1 year.
yeah, that's when she said she got a phone call from that guy, right? Was the beginning of 99?
I think so.
Yeah.
Another interesting part of this was Texaco. So
Yeah.
Texaco had to monitor the flow of oil, and they have these little monitors along the line. And I don't know, something about years was causing some problems with it. But if they didn't fix the code, then it would stop them from monitoring the oil flow. And if if that happened and they couldn't fix it within 4 hours, then they'd have to shut down the wells. And apparently, if you shut down an oil well, it's not as if you can just start it right back up. You may not be able to start it again.
So no pressure.
Yeah. And they had to do all these weird things to make sure it would work. Write some new code, test it in a different environment where you would like set the year to December 31st, 1999, and then watch the clock tick over and see what happens.
Yeah.
And then a lot of these people are relying on vendor software, but then no one's talking about their own fixes to Y2K. So no one knows if the code they rely on is going to be fixed in time.
Just pulled up something related to code that would be running longer than you expected.
Okay.
So if you have an account for JetBlue, the airline, your password cannot contain the letters Q or Z.
What?
And yes. So the reason being is that there was a touchtone phone airline booking program called Sabre that is still used today. It was created in like the 50s.
Hmm.
Saber,
You
like
had
on
to
a. Sorry,
Like
I
on
was
The
gonna make a
Office?
dumb joke. Yeah.
like SABRE.
Oh,
And
D.
so a friend of mine is actually a travel agent, and she still uses Sabre for booking related stuff. And in order to log in using that on the phone, like it required you punching in your password, and it just so happened that Q and Z are not mapped consistently on telephones,
Hmm.
and so because of that, like your password on JetBlue's site was using that system from the 50s. So just think about that. Like your internet connected like device is hitting something built in the 50s. That I mean,
That is
surely they
so
didn't plan on it.
stressful.
Wow.
Yeah, like you have to wonder like what the interface for that is. Like
just
I mean,
just knowing that that exists is stressing me out.
I mean, I've seen the computers airlines type into. It's looks very old.
yeah. But I mean if it works, and not only is the answer of like if it works, but also like it works and we don't understand how it works, but things rely on it working that way,
Yeah.
then like changing it is only going to cause like
It's
an
like
unknown set of problems.
it's like when you have a dependency, but the dependency has a bug and you're relying on that bug. So when the dependency fixes the bug, it actually breaks something for you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, I forgot. One company, the way they dealt with Y2K is they reset their internal clocks to 1972. And
Oh, yeah.
the reason they said it's in 1972 is the days of the week were all the same as the year 2000. So
Yeah.
it bought them like 28 more years to figure out the problem.
Well, they're coming
And,
up on those 28 years soon.
uh,
They got 8
uh,
more.
yeah, I mean, I guess then post that there is the ever coming 2038 that we're hitting, or in
What is
some.
that?
So, in the year 2038, if you've ever looked at a like timestamp that comes back, like the numeric ones, like the Unix time. You may
Yeah,
have seen it as
like the number of seconds.
since like January 1st, 1970, like
Yeah,
the dawn of computer time,
yeah.
and um, so those in many cases are represented as a 32-bit number,
Mm.
and that number in 2038 will hit its maximum, and then ultimately will have to roll over.
Oh my
And
gosh.
She talks about this in the book. She's like, what's the upper limit? You
right,
have to specify an upper limit for the year. Like, should we worry about the year 9,000, 10,001? Like, what is it?
yeah, so that's something that only like recently have we gotten some stuff fixed. Was I mean, it's good, like we're getting on top of some of it now, but in the Linux kernel, I believe that they have moved all of the date times to be 64-bit, which buys us a whole lot more time.
A whole lot. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
like
exponential.
yeah, so like significantly more time out of it, but like it's been like years and years of effort to get that moved.
Oh,
And
wow.
even that is just like in modern Linux kernels. And I mean, you think even now with like the number of like, I don't know, smart home devices, like Internet of Things type stuff, like that's never going to get updated past that. And so like, I mean, there are so many things that are doomed to fail due to memory constraints on that front, like that, like whether processors can't handle beyond 32 bits, or like, I mean, we're doing it, I suppose, like your code would use it in, you would have to use the processor in like a non-native way. And so um it would be a pretty big overhaul.
Hmm.
And I mean, places already bump into it though, in that like some places start like scheduling things out into the future and like making like distant predictions on what's going to happen.
Oh, yeah.
And so like for some places, like 2038 is real, because I mean it's less than 20 years away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. We only have a few minutes left. Does anyone else have like a favorite thing that we just haven't covered yet?
I'm trying to think.
I don't know how deep we can get into it due to time, but the bits about artificial life and like
Yeah.
what is
Yeah.
intelligence was totally unexpected for me. Like when just reading this book and hitting that section. And
Yeah.
I don't want to spend way too much time due to time, but I did like her kind of explanation, or like her perspective, that like intelligence being our ability to identify like like between other humans, as well as like amongst ourselves. Like I can identify myself amongst the two of you, and that identity shifts when I am in the room with somebody else as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I found that really interesting too.
She also talks about the idea, she gets into philosophy a bit with this and mentions that, maybe there really is something with biology that makes this possible that you just can't replicate with a machine. And that's it's probably not a very popular idea right now when we're trying to, I mean, not just right now, but over the last several decades we've been trying to make AI, and we've always been thinking we're really close to it.
I think a factor is that we model our brains in terms of a computer. Or, I mean, how often do we say like my brain is my computer? But rather, like the computer is a known model that we have, and we apply it to our lesser understood brain.
Yeah.
Thus, like,
Yeah, she said it's like circular logic, that you're studying the brain by studying computers, but you don't know if the brain is even like a computer.
yeah, hmm. It was definitely like a good thinking section, and
Yeah.
I think that may actually be one that I go and like re-listen to, if only to like have the conversation with somebody else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and another thing about it is she says, okay, there's Moore's law, but there is no Moore's law for software. So, in fact, there may be like a reverse correlation. Like on the contrary, as the hardware, as systems increase in complexity, it becomes harder, a lot harder to write reliable code. So even though computers are getting more and more powerful, the software isn't keeping up with that.
Yeah. This one's like we don't have to go into it because it's just small, but I really liked the chapter on her cat.
Yeah.
I thought it was, I don't know the word to use here, but it kind of broke up some of the more technical things, um, and showed her humanity in a different way, and the grief of losing her cat and her relationship with the cat, and did the cat love her?
Yeah, she compared it to a robot cat, a
Yeah,
very basic robot cat.
yeah,
But, she wants to believe that the cat loves her.
yeah.
And so that relates a lot to the artificial intelligence. Like, how to, just something about artificial intelligence just doesn't sit right with her, and she just wants to believe that there's something more to it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that was a big part of why I liked it so much. She talked about artificial intelligence, and she'd be talking about that with other people, and she'd be bringing up these questions of like what is intelligence, and how do you tell the difference between, a human and a machine, if we're if we do reach this point where artificial intelligence is as intelligent as a human, how do we tell the difference, and what defines life? And most people would just didn't really care to have the conversation, at all, and even when they would listen to what she had to say, they're just like, why are you like that? They seem to really dismiss her there. But I
Mm.
think that what she had to say about it was really interesting because it's important. Like, I don't know how to. I haven't fully formed my thought.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. It's very interesting, and I like the different perspective on it.
Yeah,
That, maybe there's something else here with artificial intelligence we're not understanding or not thinking about, and we should have a
yeah.
larger conversation about it. And like, what does it really mean? Yeah,
What does it
it
really
was
mean to
good.
be alive? Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I really
and
like.
sentience. Like, how do you even define sentience?
Yeah, it's just a good book.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's worth a reread, and I would recommend it to anybody.
Yeah.
Not even to just programmers, because she explains things so well.
I agree. Yeah, it's very accessible to someone who doesn't know much about programming. And I think it's a really good look into, well, like life as a technologist or life in code.
Yeah. And then we didn't talk about, she talks about the first rise and fall of the internet. And then now in 2017, she was predicting a second boom.
Oh yeah, and she talked about like the election in 2016, and
Yeah.
yeah, that was good too.
Oh, yeah. She talked about how that we've come to dismiss anybody who's an intermediary.
Yeah.
And so all of that tendency to dismiss intermediaries has come to ground at the feet of Donald J. Trump, where he can just say anything he wants to and dismiss mainstream media, and people will believe him.
Yeah, I thought the disintermediation was one of those things that, I mean, it was like the a full circle type theme that came through. And
Yeah.
I mean, I thought about it myself. Like, I mean, how many times do you think about like the idea of like buying a car, for example, and
Hmm.
how like dealers are scummy and only trying to get money out of you, like, and yet at the same time, how many like, you know, interpersonal relationships are you losing from that? Whether it's your mail carrier like or like food delivery person. Now it is like it's just some fungible car that drops off food on your doorstep. You don't really know who it is, and like that doesn't matter
Yeah.
as long
Yeah.
as it's there. You give them the thumbs up or thumbs down in the app.
And speaking of fungible, there were 45 words in this book that I had to look up that I had no idea what they meant. She uses some big words, but I like it.
She does. Yeah.
All right. That's it. That's the book. That was fun.
Yeah,
It's fun.
All right, so that is Life in Code. Next time, Jason and I will be going through 7 languages in 7 weeks, and that's going to be a lot of fun and a lot of hard work. Um, you can
yeah,
find the transcript and show notes at orbit.fm/bookbites. You can follow the podcast at bookbitesfm. And I'm on Twitter at Agarhar. Jason, where can people find you?
I'm on Twitter at Staten Jason.
And Megan, where can people find you on the internet?
I'm on all the things. I don't post often though, but I'm on Twitter. It's Megan _too close.
Cool. Okay. See y'all next time.
See ya.
See ya.